Hello, beautiful and lovely gamers. My name is Jonal 222. Rollock is actually just around the corner, and I decided to do an episode here of Meta Talk. Of course, where we cover meta strategies and tactics here in Overwatch, talking about different team compositions that has been run in 222 that most likely we will see more and more of in 222. This will not be going off any previous OWL or contenders matches as first on or anything like that. This will be going on the three really standard, the bunker, death ball, and the dive, how that works from a meta standpoint, the strength of weaknesses and so on of the different things. I think that there's a lot, because there's been a lot of teams that have been reaching out to me and I have been doing some consulting work for and so on of late, because a lot of them has forgotten how to play, or just doesn't have play that play doing a lot of these metas, or have forgotten how a lot of these metas were working. So that's what we're gonna cover today. Of course, if you like this type of content, liking the video always help out the channel, and subscribe and bell notification if you like Overwatch and gaming, FPS especially in general. And as always, if you want to hire me as a private coach, I'm back in Oslo now, so it's 50 euros for a 2-hour session. So hit me up on our Discord server, which is linked down in the description, which you, by the way, should join anyway. And I hope I see you there. Let's talk about the most common one. Let's talk about death ball. Death ball is known in Overwatch as kind of like the bread and butter, the standard of Overwatch. And what death ball brings to the table is quite simple. You have a very push front line, and a lot of us knows this from GOAT. You have normally a Zarya and a Reinhardt. The Zarya is the bubble of Ryan, so the Ryan can actually trade hits without taking too much damage. And also you have a very active front liner. The Zarya can beam and do a lot of damage if she's high energy. You also have and this is one of the great reasons GOATs were so powerful, Graviton and Shatter are both very powerful team winning ultimates, but they are also at the same time build ultimates, meaning you Shatter and you can build Graviton in the Shatter. You Graviton, you can build a Shatter into, right? So they can chain each other very easily. They're very easily comboed, and they're very team winning. A bigger Shatter normally wins the fight. A big grab can normally win the fight, or force out very powerful support ultimates to have it countered. Meaning they're very powerful ultimate, therefore very powerful frontlines with a lot of damage. And they are normally played in some sense similar to this. This is a Ryan, a Lucio is normally always played in death ball due to the fact that you actually need to close gap and push. And the major weakness of it is normally that the Reinhardt loses shield or loses HP, so he can't advance, or that you get forced out too many abilities. That's why we need to run Lucio, so we can actually close the gap before the Ryan shield is down, the Ryan's taking too much damage, or we are forced to pop too many ultimates or abilities to keep the Ryan up so the push can actually happen. DPSs in 2-2 are very, very fluent. You can play a lot of things around a death ball. You can play with a Genji, you can play with a Hanzo, you can play with a Kree, with a Widow, with a Pharah, with most things. You can play with Sombra, Doomfist, you can play with a lot of things. Even Tracer can be applied in death ball, because a death ball will apply pressure, and then you can either say, okay, I want to have a certain amount of either, snipers or a certain amount of damage dealers in the comp that fulfills different roles. Like I can have, in this scenario, I can have a Hanzo top, and then McCree in the main group, protecting and helping the Ryan. So when the Ryan is pushing and Zarya is pushing, whatever, we have a Kree here for range that will apply range damage from this angle. We have a Hanzo from this angle. The death ball in itself will push in on them, and in general that will help us apply a lot of pressure from different angles and do a lot of things. Also, if they push our death ball, we have stuns. There's a lot of stuff we can shut down with the stun. Of course, Hanzo combos grab very well, and this is like the main philosophy behind different picks. You can swap this out for a Genji, all of a sudden you have an engaged DPS. You can also swap the Kree out for a Genji, all of a sudden you have an engaged DPS that can also take angles, and you have Dragon Blade, which opens up some more powerful. If you swap the Kree out for the Genji, you do lose range, you do lose stun, so your main group gets weaker as you put a flanker in for the McCree. However, you do get the fact that he can set up on different high ground, that he has Dragon Blade, he can engage, and if you want to play it like that, that is really up to you as a coach and as a team. Support-wise, we're playing this with Ascend. You can play this with Ascend, you can play with an Ana, you can play with most stuff. Normally, Zenyatta was played because of the damage that you get from it. Again, you want to advance, you want to kill, you want to do damage, and you need to watch out again that this guy has a shield that he needs to more or less keep, recharging and using. So when the engage happen, having damage boost on the target will help us burn and nuke their front line first, especially if they also run a Ryan. We also get trance, we get a lot of damage, and we get some decent range healing, but of course we have less sustain, especially since the Lucio is a must pick. You can kind of trade. If you trade this for an Ana, you get more healing, you get more utility abilities, such as Nade and Sleep, but you do lose the saving grace Transcend, which is the one of, if not the strongest ultimate in the game, and you also lose a lot of damage if you swap away from the Zenyatta. You can play this with a Baptiste, you can play with a lot of things, but in a lot of scenarios it was played with a Zenyatta or an Ana for Nano Boost, which could pop onto the Rhine. That is Deathbolt. It has a lot of weaknesses. It is reason that it was so powerful with Goats was that you had so much sustain in it, right? You had Brig, you had Diva. Your main group was unkillable as long as it made it to the fighting area. Normally the objective to force a fighting objective. Now, however, it's very weak. The Rhine can get bullied quite easily. He will normally, draining his resources as he makes onto the point can make him very useless. And the fact that we don't have the fact that he can brawl is that he cannot just rush onto the point and then establish himself. He needs to push up and claim space for his DPSs that can't advance onto the point, right? So something like this can be a very, very common formation in a Deathbolt, as they're trying to push the enemy backwards. You kind of off-angle your McCree, you off-angle your Hanzo, you send it far back. You can all notice that it's mainly the Rhine and the Sari that's on the point and actually pushing the objective physically. So you can't put as many bodies on the point without being allowed to play a lot of tanks. Since this guy goes on the point, he feeds. This guy goes on the point, he feeds, right? So you have to play your tanks on the objective, lose your speed boosting and jumping around doing his thing, and then you have to put the DPS for the back, applying angles and so on. These guys can, as soon as the tanks start moving to the point, you can start pushing up your McCree and getting him quite aggressive as long as there are space to be made. But the point is that we can't establish as much of the point, and he's therefore much, much weaker now in the meta compared to what you can play on. And that goes over to Dive, which is the most notoriable team composition. It's normally played with a Winston and Diva. You can play Dive with a bunch of other stuff. You can play it with a Zarya. I've seen it played with a Zarya. You can play it with a Hammond instead of the Winston, or even instead of the Diva to have more of a CC. But the most common one is the Winston and the Diva, where the roles really goes as followed. The Winston creates space. He chokes out areas. He essentially says, hey, support, fuck you, get the fuck off. Essentially denying certain areas. So if he takes here, the gateway here is denied, right? He can easily drop and deny certain areas with his Tesla cannon. That's his job. His job is to deny space and shut off as many enemies as possible. And even hard engage onto one target because he has insane mobility. The Diva's job is normally to peel for the Winston, of course helping kill stuff, but she's mainly there for tank control. She controls the tanks, since the Winston sucks ass on controlling tanks. They have more damage in close quarters, they have more health a lot of time, or at least equal health, and they have armor, which the Winston sucks against. So the tanks can normally deal with the Winston. That's why you have a Diva. The shotguns of the Diva are very heavily countering towards tank players. And you also have defense mages who can deny a lot of very powerful abilities and therefore help with the dive. And she can to a certain extent follow. One thing to always remember is that Winston moves the fastest and of these two. So while, for example, in this scenario, the Winston can make it to crates easily, the Diva cannot. And no of her other flankers can either. This can be played in a multitude of ways. That is like the backbone of this team composition. One creates space and attacks like squishies and deals with those. The other one is for tank control. That's a very generalized version of dive. At that point, you can play with a bunch of it. You can play with a double flanker, right? Which could look something like this, right? At this point, you have a Diva that's kind of set up on the low ground. You have Winston. You can just take high ground. Your Tracer is flanking for off angle. You have a Lucio here to speed boost these two. And then you have a Zenyatta for the back to discord a target and to put heals on somebody. This is a very common setup for a dive comp, or of some sorts. As, for example, let's say that if we want to attack someone, let's say there was for some reason there was a Ana that was out of position over here. Normally I would want to do a scenario over here, but whatever. Let's say there's an Ana over here. She's here. Okay, yeah, we want to get that Ana. We want to dive the Ana. Okay, at that point, you could speed boost, because again, this guy can make it in one leap. This guy cannot. This one cannot. The Tracer can. She can just walk in here. But in general, the Diva and the Genji cannot reach. The Monkey will at that point, for example, dive. He can dive, for example, top, or he can dive on her. Bubble. The speed boost would happen so that the Genji can get closer. The Diva can fly, get in. And for example, she can take here. Start bullying the tanks. For example, I think they were playing Deathbolt. This is where dive is so good. They can jump over the tanks and essentially just ignore them. The Diva would take here, and at that point start denying the tanks from you doing anything. The Rhine would have to put up a shield to stop the Diva from the damage. The Rhine now has to run after the Winston, which he can't reach. The Genji has been speed boosted and can therefore engage. The Tracer comes from another flank and can therefore engage. The Lucio is speeding in and being a disturbance and, for example, positioning himself over here, and the Zenyatta is still in main applying damage. So at this point, it's very difficult for a Death Ball, for example, to deal with this, because the Ryan can't block all these angles, he can't chase the kills, he needs to watch out for the D.Va. There's also Lucio on him that can push him out of position. At the same time, the support line is dead. They can't save this, even with holding Zarya bubbles, which would normally be forced out by a D.Va, right? If they don't have Zarya bubbles, okay, then the Ryan can't move, right? So if the Zarya bubble disappears, okay, no Zarya bubble for the Ryan, that even could do a job. If this bubble the backline, even then, there's so much damage that they will get picks, and at that point, their supports are out. And at that point, we have established a main group in the backline, which we can kite backwards on, right, and play around here and re-engage and re-engage and re-engage. The job of dive is very mobile. A lot of people know this, but they don't know why it's mobile. The mobility of dive comes from the setups. The fact that you can put in, let's say there are a couple of scenarios with dive comp that you can use. There's a Zenyatta here. Okay, he's been here. Okay, let's just move this because I don't want it, right? So he is there. I'll just put on some roofs. Okay, the enemy Zenyatta is like over here for some reason, right? The enemy is playing Death Ball. So they put like a Rhine over here, right? They essentially are pushing the payload that way. Okay, so we have established a dive comp. We have a trace. So we have, for example, let's say the Zen is actually far back here. They're trying to create space away from this roof of the opposing team so that the enemy Genji cannot do shit. Okay, at this point, okay, there's a couple of things. In double, you can have this with double snipers. You can play this way, I think. But if this is in the double flanker, you can put your tracer here. She will be flanking the Zen, right? So that she can reach the monkey's dive target. The monkey will establish icon control with the rest. They will normally do this as a setup. Even as attackers, they would do this. You need to set up dive. That's why it's so difficult to do. Because you need to plan where you want to attack. Not who, but where you want to attack, right? You also have your D.Va up here because most of the time you put majority of your team up there. Let's say you also have let's say you have a Lucio in main, for example, just for some reason. You have a Lucio because you're scared of your Zen, because your Zen is on low ground main. Okay, at this point you have, okay, they are pressuring the Zen just needs to not die, but he's dealing damage and forcing shields up and whatnot. This one is low. So what normally this would look like is the monkey would leap as he's the fastest. The tracer would go as well as the D.Va drops and the Genji also drops here. These two are just pressuring the main group of the opposing tanks, right? They could even wait here for a reaction, like the tanks start moving backwards, to go in and start dealing a lot of damage. That is their job at this point. They can't engage the Zenyatta, so they would send 2 people to engage the Zenyatta, take him out, and now the enemy team has been pincered. There is now crossfire from here. The tanks are coming in there with the tracer, which can, by the way, all these can disengage if they wanted to, and there's pressure from the main group, and the enemy team just lost their Zenyatta. Well, we haven't lost anybody. That's the power of playing dive, and that's also where you will see that the Ryan and the Zarya against dive are useless. They can't do anything. They just get jumped around, and there's not much they can do instead of standing on top of their Zen, which still would die because Tesla Cannon goes through players, and Tracers can just come up around the back, and Genji can dash straight through. So even if they're on top of their players, it would still most likely cost the life of their backline, and that is why dive is so powerful, especially over something like Death Ball. If you look at the last one, which would be, and again, remember these are very, very simplified versions. So if you have any questions, then ask those down in the comment section or on our Discord server, and I will try to answer them. I'm actually thinking about making a full guide to dive, where I go very advanced into details. This is a simplified version of dive comp. Let's talk about something in the realm of a bunker comp. This is not a fish comp, but I could make it a fish comp just if I wanted to. There we go. Now we have fishing. Now, normally used on defense, can be used on offense, but normally it's used in defense. But bunker is just working on one premise only. We have a lot of damage, we have a lot of range, we will therefore wear you down before you can even engage. This works great against dive, this works great against Death Ball. That is what bunkers work, because again, you can't jump around somebody that is always standing, like, that has fortified an area. Like again, dive can deal with Death Ball because, okay, we have the front line there, the back line there, the damage deals here, right? Okay, great, we can isolate these, or these, right? That's super, super easy because there are weaknesses in the formation. And in a good bunker, there are really no weaknesses, and it's very difficult. You can't pull the tanks due to fortify, shotguns, take a breather. Bullying the squishies is very difficult. The same goes with Death Ball. Engaging a bunker with a Death Ball is really, really difficult because you lose your shield and you lose your health and you lose absolutely everything before you even make it to the objective. So bunker is really, really difficult to play again. This is a bunker comp minus this guy. I can swap him out for the Senyata, I think it was. This is a comp that a team that I coached a while back, Global Esport, played in Contenders, actually when Kefir was playing. And this is a very, very powerful. This works great against Goats. I'm not sure if they played it with a Hog or if they played it with something else. I'm actually a little rusty on the memory. But the whole idea is quite simple. Do not let the Goats even try to push, right? So you have a Pharmacy that just flies here, spams over the choke, spams in the choke, and spots during the engage of choke. You will have an Ash tossing Dynamite to try to engage from here and deal damage. And of course, if the Goats flanks, okay, we will tossing Dynamite dealing damage here. If the Goats start doing a rotation, the backline will consistently be hit by the Pharah, consistently all the time. They set up with the high ground, they immediately start taking damage again, and they can be pushed down and split. At the same time, you get a consistent stream from the Orisa. There will be gaps where the hook and the Hall combo can work out, and there will be damage from a Senyata, there will be Discord Ops. This is incredibly difficult to deal with, on top of the fact that how much area denial this team comp has. You have damage boost, you have whole hog, you have transcendence to stay alive on objective, you have Bob, you have Barrage, you have Valkyrie. All of these are difficult to fight against in a team fight. They are very powerful ultimate that can area denial or sustain during a team fight and quickly burst, making this team comp very difficult to actually push. They just have weaknesses during attack and also doing defense. Normally their bunkers thing is that yes, when you have set up, you can be very, very powerful, but because you are immobile, we can either pressure you out with a lot of damage, like we can force your shields down and then starting looking for picks where you're no longer allowed to keep this defensive position. You need to hide and wait for shields to come back up line, or we can force you to rotate. For example, if you could push, for example, if you had pushed all the way around here, right? You would force, if you had come around here and you set up here, you would have forced the bunker to rotate. And during a rotation, a bunker is very weak. A bunker is super weak during a rotation. Because again, they haven't set up the shields, they haven't got their perfect position, they haven't set up their spam areas and whatnot. They might not be in the ideal positioning, they might have lost high ground, which again makes them very difficult to get to. So the long term of the bunker has now been disturbed. That's also not how you deal with Bastion bunkers. You can either just spam it or you can force it to rotate, essentially moving the Bastion out of turret mode where he's weak and where the bunker won't have time to deal a lot of damage. And these rotations of course should be done using walls and other stuff like a normal rotation would be done, so that you don't lose health forcing their rotation, right? If you can force their rotation without really losing any shield or any health and abilities and force them to move because your positioning has been so close to them that their defensive position now is weak where it was strong. It's weak due to your new positioning that you've done with rotating, that as soon as they move you can just engage them. So as soon as they start rotating and you're trying to find a new defensive position, you immediately start attacking them either with your death ball or whatnot, or your dive comp. That is the ideal way to do so. You could do this with dive comp, you can do this with a lot of things. But again, the big thing about bunker is to never let the enemy team ever engage you. They're not allowed to push you, they're not allowed to engage, they're not allowed to set up dives, they're not allowed to set up pushes. They're always low health, never set it up, there's always picks or potential for picks. That's strength of bunker comp. That is the 3 most common comps, and right now it seems like there's a lot of revolving around the bunker meta, as bunker can be very difficult to deal with and can be fairly easy to run. However, again, as I've said to a lot of the teams that I've been coaching, a lot of things that I've been finding success with doing scrims in higher GM, like 4.2, 4.3, even 4.4, right? And that in those elos is that dive works really well. If you know how to set up dives, you can very easily pressure out a bunker comp on specific and certain maps, of course, but especially King of the Hills, bunker can very quickly fall to dive if you know how to properly play and set up dive, but it is very, very difficult. Therefore, bunker is a really, really powerful team composition right now. If you like these kind of videos, I put a lot of effort into them. A like on the video would always be, tell me your comments down below if there's something that you want me to cover more in depth, or if there's a comment that you want to add because I didn't really cover all of it, because again, it's a video, I need to shut stuff down. If there's something that you want to comment that you think is important for other people to know about this team composition or whatnot, tell that below so we can help each other, just improve and get better at the game. It's an awesome community. Join me on our Discord community to help with that as well. My Twitter and my Twitch will also be linked down in the description. As always, guys, I love you guys very much. Please take care, stay positive. As always, my name has been Jonal, and keep the enemy in your crosshair.